"The boy is my son, but not my wife's," the Count whispered, thrusting the newborn into Susanna's trembling hands. Outside, carriage wheels churned through mud, his wife's men searching. The baby's cry pierced the darkness. One choice: hide him and risk everything, or surrender him to certain death.
Hello everyone! Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video and share with loved ones, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin.
The storm arrived with biblical fury that November night in 1884, lashing Richmond's cobblestone streets with sheets of freezing rain. Inside the modest boarding house on Church Hill, Susanna Becker bent over her washboard, hands raw and aching as she scrubbed another gentleman's shirt. The rhythmic sound of fabric against wood had become the soundtrack of her life. A 20-year-old Pamunkey woman, invisible to the society whose linens she cleaned. The pounding on the door shattered the night's monotony. Susanna froze, soap suds dripping from her fingers. No one called at this hour. Through the window, she glimpsed a black carriage, its lanterns glowing like demon eyes through the downpour. Another knock, more urgent. She opened the door to find Count Timothee Jefferson on her threshold. Even drenched, he radiated aristocratic bearing, tall, impeccably dressed beneath a soaked greatcoat, descendant of Virginia's founding families. But his face told a different story. Hollow eyes, trembling hands, the desperation of a man drowning in his own choices. In his arms, wrapped in silk too fine for the storm, a newborn baby wailed. "Miss Becker," he gasped, stepping inside without invitation. Water pooled at his feet. "Forgive the intrusion. There's no time. They'll discover I'm gone." Susanna stared at the crying infant, her heart already understanding what her mind refused to accept. "The boy is my son, but not my wife's," Count Jefferson said, his voice breaking on each word. He thrust the bundle toward her trembling hands. "His mother was your sister, Mary. She died bringing him into this world 3 days ago. I cannot. Virginia must never know. She would see him dead before acknowledged." The world tilted. Mary, her beautiful sister, who'd vanished into service at the Jefferson estate 8 months prior, who'd stopped answering letters, who Susanna had feared lost to some terrible fate. Now this, a child, alive and screaming, all that remained of her. "You're insane," Susanna whispered, but her arms had already accepted the baby's weight. "I can't hide a white man's child. They'll destroy me. They'll say I stole him or worse. No one knows he exists except my physician, who I've paid handsomely for silence." Jefferson pulled a leather pouch from his coat, heavy with coins. "This will sustain you for months. I'll send more, always anonymously. Please, Miss Becker, you're his only family now, his only chance." Outside, carriage wheels churned through mud. Men's voices called through the storm, searching, hunting. The Count's face went white. "Virginia's brothers, if they find him." He pressed the money into Susanna's hand, his grip desperate. "His name is Daniel. Tell him his father loved him enough to ensure he'd live, even if he could never claim him." Before Susanna could protest, Jefferson was gone, disappearing into the tempest like a ghost. Through the window, she watched his carriage race away just as 2 others rounded the corner, their drivers shouting questions into the darkness. Susanna stood frozen, a fortune in coins weighing one hand, an impossible burden crying in her arms. The baby, Daniel, had her sister's nose, her delicate features, but his eyes were pale, his skin fair. No one would believe he was hers by birth. The questions would be merciless, the accusations worse. Yet as she looked down at his tiny, helpless face, she saw Mary, her sister, who'd sung lullabies and braided Susanna's hair, who'd dreamed of a better life and found only death in a mansion that consumed native girls like kindling. The baby's cry softened as Susanna held him closer, warmth against her chest. "I've got you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "God help us both, but I've got you." Outside, the storm raged on, indifferent to the secret now sheltered within these walls, a secret that would reshape destinies and shatter the foundations of Virginia's most powerful family. The Count's carriage disappeared into the night. Behind it, 12 years of shadows began. 12 years transformed Susanna Becker from a hopeful young woman into something harder, forged by relentless cruelty and unwavering love. Richmond's Church Hill district had become her prison and sanctuary both, a place where she labored endlessly while the world whispered poison about the native woman raising a white child. Daniel Jefferson Becker stood at the window of their cramped apartment, now 12 years old, watching carriages roll past on their way to Capitol Square. His pale eyes, so like his father's, tracked the elegant ladies and gentlemen with innocent curiosity. He was tall for his age, lean, with features that marked him as neither fully white nor native, belonging nowhere, accepted by none. "Mother, why do the other children call me mongrel?" His voice carried the particular pain of youth confronting hatred it cannot comprehend. Susanna's hands stilled over the washboard. 12 years of this question in various forms, each iteration cutting deeper. She'd rehearsed answers, crafted explanations, but truth remained a luxury she couldn't afford. "Because people fear what they don't understand," she said finally, wringing out a gentleman's shirt with unnecessary force. "And they're cruel to what they fear. But who was my father? You never speak of him." The question hung between them like smoke. Susanna turned, studying the boy who'd consumed her entire existence. She'd sacrificed everything. Her place among her own Pamunkey people, who viewed Daniel's presence as betrayal. Her standing in white Richmond, where she was considered a foolish squaw or worse. The boarding house had evicted them twice. Churches refused them entry. Shopkeepers served her last, if at all. Yet Daniel thrived despite it all. She'd scraped together pennies for books, found a sympathetic schoolteacher willing to tutor him in secret. The boy had his father's intelligence, his mother's gentle spirit, and Susanna's fierce determination. "Your father loved you very much," she said carefully. "That's all that matters. But he's dead, isn't he? That's why he never visits." Susanna nodded, the lie easier than truth. Count Timothee Jefferson lived still. She'd glimpsed him twice over the years, always at a distance, his face etched with longing and shame. The anonymous payments arrived monthly, left at the postal office under false names, never enough, but always something. She knew he watched from the shadows of his gilded cage, married to Virginia Thompson's ice and venom, unable to claim the son who should have borne his name with pride. A knock interrupted them. Susanna opened the door to find a well-dressed Negro boy, perhaps 14, holding an envelope sealed with unmarked wax. "For Miss Becker," he said quietly, glancing nervously down the hallway before disappearing. Inside, bills, enough for 2 months' rent, and food besides. No note, never a note, but Susanna recognized the pattern. Jefferson's guilt money, delivered through intermediaries who asked no questions. That evening she stood at her own window after Daniel slept, watching gaslights flicker across Richmond's proud facade. Somewhere in a mansion on Franklin Street, Count Jefferson likely stood at his window too, perhaps wondering if his son was warm, fed, happy, perhaps tormented by the choice he'd made, life for Daniel, but a life lived in shadows. She thought of Mary, her sister's last words as fever took her. "Promise me he'll know love, Susanna. Promise me." A promise kept through 12 years of persecution. A promise that had cost Susanna her youth, her prospects, her place in the world. She worked herself to exhaustion, washing other people's filth, endured their contempt, absorbed their hatred like a shield, protecting Daniel from the worst of it. But she'd kept her promise. In the bedroom, Daniel stirred, murmuring in his sleep. Susanna returned to him, smoothing hair from his forehead with calloused hands that had scrubbed 1,000 shirts to keep him alive. "Your father loved you," she whispered again, this time to the darkness. "And so do I. Whatever comes, remember that." Outside, Richmond slept, unaware that in a mansion across town, Count Timothee Jefferson clutched his chest, pain radiating down his arm, death's first whisper calling him to account for choices made one stormy night 12 years before. The shadows were about to break. Count Timothee Jefferson knew he was dying. The pain in his chest had become constant, a tightening vice that stole his breath and clouded his vision. His physician, Dr. Nathaniel Crawford, had been brutally honest. Weeks, perhaps a month, if he remained still and quiet. But stillness meant leaving Daniel unprotected, and that was unthinkable. In his study at the Franklin Street mansion, Jefferson sat across from James Whitfield, a young attorney whose father had died fighting for abolition. Whitfield's reputation preceded him, a man who took cases others refused, who believed justice transcended color and class. "You're asking me to risk everything," Whitfield said, studying the documents Jefferson had prepared. "Your wife's family controls half the judges in Virginia. If this fails, it won't fail because I'm giving you proof." Jefferson produced a brass cylinder, his hands trembling. "Thomas Edison's phonograph. I've recorded my full testimony, Daniel's birth, his mother's identity, my intentions for his inheritance, witnessed by Dr. Crawford and my banker, Samuel Porter." Whitfield leaned forward, intrigued despite his reservations. "And the will?" "Drafted, but not yet executed. I'm leaving Daniel half the Virginia properties and full rights to my London holdings, investments Virginia knows nothing about. There's also a trust at Lloyd's of London, established 5 years ago when I understood my wife's true nature. She'll contest everything. Let her try." Jefferson's voice hardened. "I've documented her cruelties, her threats against Susanna and the boy. I have letters, witnesses." The study door burst open. Countess Virginia Thompson. Jefferson stood in the entrance, her face a mask of aristocratic fury. Behind her, 2 of her brothers, hard men who'd built the Thompson fortune through ruthless business practices. "Discussing your bastard, Timothy?" Her voice could have frozen bourbon. "Did you think I wouldn't discover your little conspiracy?" Jefferson rose unsteadily, one hand pressed to his chest. "He's my son, Virginia. I won't let you erase him." "Your son?" She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "He's a half-breed mongrel spawned on a savage girl you took advantage of. You've dishonored this family, and I'll be damned if I let some laundress's brat steal what belongs to me." "What belongs to you?" Jefferson's face flushed dangerously. "You've never given me anything but contempt. You married me for my name and spent 12 years making me regret it. Daniel is innocent. Daniel is a mistake." Virginia's composure shattered. and mistakes can be corrected. I've already spoken to Judge Harrison. My brother assures me no court in Virginia will recognize that creature's claim. Whitfield stood, carefully collecting the documents. Countess, threatening disinheritance of a legitimate heir is legitimate. Virginia's laugh turned vicious. He's illegitimate by definition, Mr. Whitfield, and if you pursue this farce, I'll ensure you never practice law again. My family has influence beyond your comprehension. Jefferson clutched his chest, pain radiating through his arm. The room tilted sickeningly. James, take the documents, the recording, protect them. Timothy? Virginia's voice changed, uncertainty flickering across her face. But Count Jefferson collapsed, his body striking the Persian rug with a terrible finality. Whitfield rushed to his side, checking for pulse, while Virginia's brothers blocked the door. "Get Dr. Crawford," Whitfield shouted. Virginia stood frozen, watching her husband's labored breathing, calculation replacing shock. She turned to her brothers. "Secure this room. Every document, every letter, nothing leaves here." "He needs medical attention," Whitfield protested. "He's getting it, but those papers stay." Virginia's eyes fixed on the phonograph cylinder. "Especially that." Jefferson's lips moved soundlessly, his hand reaching toward Whitfield, toward the evidence of Daniel's birthright. His eyes held desperate urgency. "Protect my son. Protect him, please," before rolling back. Dr. Crawford arrived minutes later, but everyone in the room understood the truth. Count Timothee Jefferson would not survive the night, and with him would die Daniel's only chance at justice, unless James Whitfield could escape with proof that Virginia Thompson would kill to destroy. What happens when a mother's love faces a countess's hatred? When a child's future hangs on documents that powerful people will destroy? Can James escape with the truth before Virginia erases Daniel from history forever? Subscribe now, because the next act will shatter everything you think you know about justice, betrayal, and the deadly price of secrets. Don't miss what happens when the storm finally breaks. Count Timothee Jefferson's funeral was a spectacle of Virginia aristocracy. St. Paul's Episcopal Church overflowed with Richmond's elite, all performing grief for a man most had barely known. Countess Virginia Thompson Jefferson played her role flawlessly, the devastated widow, veiled in black silk, accepting condolences with practiced grace. From the back pew, Susanna Becker watched through a borrowed veil of her own. Daniel pressed close beside her. The boy stared at the mahogany casket, tears streaming silently down his face. For a father he'd never known, but somehow understood he'd lost. "We shouldn't be here," Susanna whispered, acutely aware of the hostile glances from those who had noticed their presence. "I wanted to say goodbye," Daniel said softly, "even if he never said it to me." James Whitfield found them after the service, his face grim. "We need to leave, now." Outside, away from curious ears, he revealed the catastrophe. Virginia's solicitors filed the official will this morning. Everything goes to her, the properties, investments, even the London holdings. There's no mention of Daniel anywhere. But the documents you showed me, the recording, gone. Whitfield's jaw clenched. Virginia's brothers ransacked Jefferson's study that night. They found the phonograph cylinder, the draft will, everything. Destroyed it all. Susanna felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Then, it's over. Not entirely. Jefferson was clever. He'd already sent copies to Lloyd's of London before Virginia discovered our meeting. The trust there is irrevocable. She can't touch it without proving fraud. But accessing it requires establishing Daniel's paternity in court. And that's where we face problems. What kind of problems? The kind where Virginia has paid off half the courthouse. Whitfield pulled them into an alley as a carriage rolled past. Virginia's brothers, their faces hard and searching. Judge Harrison Thompson, her brother, has been assigned to hear any claims against the estate. She's also hired the Pinkerton agency to investigate you. They're building a case that you kidnapped Daniel, that you're extorting the family. Daniel's voice cracked with fear. They're going to take me away? Before Whitfield could answer, 3 men rounded the corner. Rough types, definitely not mourners. The lead man smiled without warmth. Miss Becker, we have a warrant for your arrest. Kidnapping, fraud, and attempted extortion of the Jefferson estate. That's absurd. Whitfield started. And you, lawyer boy, are charged with conspiracy. The man produced papers that looked official enough. The Countess has been very thorough. Now, we can do this easy or hard. Your choice. Susanna pulled Daniel behind her. Those aren't real warrants. Virginia doesn't have that authority. Maybe not. The man's hand moved to his coat. But we got authority enough for what needs doing. That boy's coming with us. Countess says he needs proper institutionalization. Growing up with savages ain't healthy for a white child. The word hung in the air like poison. Institutionalization, a death sentence for any child, especially one of mixed heritage. Susanna had heard stories of such places, warehouses for unwanted children where cruelty was policy and survival unlikely. Run! Whitfield shoved them backward, just as the men lunged forward. What followed was chaos, a desperate sprint through Richmond's back alleys, Daniel's hand locked in Susanna's as they fled. Behind them, shouts and pursuit. Whitfield led them through servants' quarters, across gardens, through a sympathetic shopkeeper's store who barred the door behind them. They emerged near the James River docks, gasping and terrified. There's a merchant vessel leaving for Liverpool in 2 hours, Whitfield panted. The Mary Catherine. Her captain owes me a favor. He'll take us as passengers, no questions asked. England? Susanna stared at him in disbelief. We can't just flee the country. We can't stay here. Whitfield grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. Virginia has bought Virginia. Every judge, every official. But in London, the Chancery Court doesn't answer to the Thompson family. Lloyd's of London has Jefferson's trust documents, witnessed by British citizens. It's our only chance. Behind them, smoke rose from Church Hill. Susanna's heart lurched with terrible understanding. Your boarding house, Whitfield said quietly. Virginia's sending a message. Everything you owned doesn't matter. Susanna looked down at Daniel. At this boy who had cost her everything and given her everything. We go to England. As night fell, 3 fugitives boarded the Mary Catherine, leaving behind a burning home and a countess whose rage had only begun to ignite. The Mary Catherine was a weathered merchant vessel that smelled of tobacco, salt, and decades of Atlantic crossings. Captain Maurice Brennan, a grizzled Irishman who'd once needed legal help avoiding deportation, asked no questions when James Whitfield appeared at the gangplank with a native woman and a terrified boy. Cargo holds full, but I've got a cabin below deck, Brennan said, eyeing the docks nervously. Not fancy, but it's private. We sail with the tide in 90 minutes. Those 90 minutes stretched like hours. Susanna held Daniel in the cramped cabin, while Whitfield stood watch topside, scanning the docks for Virginia's men. The boy trembled despite the blanket wrapped around his shoulders, his world reduced to ashes and uncertainty in a single day. Where will we live in England? Daniel whispered. What will we do? We'll fight, Susanna said firmly, stroking his hair. and we'll win. Your father wanted you to have what's rightfully yours, and we won't let that woman steal it." The ship lurched as lines were cast off. Relief flooded through Susanna. They'd made it. They were safe. "Captain, hold that vessel." Her blood turned to ice. Through the porthole, she saw them, 6 men, thundering down the dock, led by Virginia's brother, Marcus Thompson. Behind them, a final figure emerged from a carriage. The Countess herself, her face twisted with fury even at this distance. "Too late, gentlemen," Captain Brennan called down. "We're already underway. $20 to any man who stops that ship," Marcus roared to the dock workers. For a terrible moment, Susanna thought they'd succeed. Sailors hesitated, greed warring with duty. But Brennan pulled a pistol from his coat. "First man touches my vessel answers to me and the maritime courts. We're in international waters in 5 minutes. You've got no authority here." The Mary Catherine pulled into the James River's current, widening the gap between ship and shore. Virginia Thompson stood at the dock's edge, a black-clad figure radiating malevolence, watching her prey escape. "She'll follow us," Whitfield said quietly, joining Susanna below deck. "She has the resources. We bought time, nothing more." He was right. 3 days into the Atlantic crossing, a crewman discovered 2 stowaways, rough men with Virginia accents and Pinkerton credentials, hidden among the tobacco barrels. Captain Brennan confined them to the brig, but the message was clear. Virginia's reach extended even here. "They were supposed to kill us mid-voyage," Whitfield explained after questioning them. "Make it look like an accident. Pirates, storm damage, anything plausible. Virginia wants Daniel dead, and you blamed for it." The revelation sent Susanna spiraling into paranoia. She refused to let Daniel out of her sight, sleeping only in shifts, with Whitfield keeping watch. The boy sensed her terror and withdrew into himself, eating little, speaking less. Then, in the second week, as November storms battered the vessel, Daniel's condition worsened. What began as a cough became raging fever, pneumonia. The ship's surgeon declared, the damp conditions, the stress, his weakened state, all conspiring against him. "He needs a hospital," the surgeon said bluntly. "Proper medicine, warmth, care, I can't provide here. Without it—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Susanna spent 72 hours in a waking nightmare, pressing cold cloths to Daniel's burning forehead, forcing water between cracked lips, praying to gods both Christian and Pamunkey. The boy thrashed in delirium, calling for his father, for Mary, for salvation that seemed impossible in this pitching wooden prison. "Please," she begged Whitfield during Daniel's worst night, "tell me he'll survive this. Tell me I didn't bring him here to die." James Whitfield, who'd maintained stoic composure through everything, finally broke. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice raw. "God help me, Susanna, I don't know." She'd never heard him use her first name before. In that moment, barriers erected by propriety and circumstance crumbled. He took her hand, calloused washerwoman's fingers intertwined with an attorney's, and they sat vigil together as the Atlantic raged around them. Daniel's fever broke on the 14th day, just as the English coast appeared on the horizon. He woke weak but lucid, his pale eyes focusing on Susanna's exhausted face. "Mother?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Are we there yet?" Susanna laughed and sobbed simultaneously, pulling him close. "Yes, sweetheart, we're almost there." Through the porthole, Liverpool's docks materialized through morning mist. Somewhere in that grey city, in London beyond it, lay their only hope for justice. But also waiting, Susanna knew with cold certainty, was Virginia Thompson's British welcome. Lawyers, influence, and the full weight of transatlantic wealth arrayed against three refugees who'd survived the crossing but might not survive what came next. James squeezed her hand once more before releasing it. Whatever happens now, we face it together. Daniel sat up slowly, staring at England with wonder and trepidation. Do you think we can really win, Mr. Whitfield? The attorney looked at this boy who'd suffered so much for the crime of being born and chose hope over honesty. Yes, Daniel, I think we can. The Mary Catherine docked at Liverpool as church bells tolled noon, delivering 3 souls to a foreign shore where their battle for truth would either triumph or destroy them completely. The royal courts of justice on the Strand stood like a cathedral to British law. Gothic spires, vaulted ceilings, and centuries of precedent carved into every stone. To Susanna Becker, it felt like a mausoleum where justice came to die. All rise for the Honourable Vice-Chancellor, Sir Edmund Rothwell. The Chancery Court fell silent as the judge entered, his robes flowing, his face carved from the same unforgiving granite as the building itself. Susanna gripped Daniel's hand beneath the gallery railing, feeling the boy's pulse racing against her palm. Across the aisle, Countess Virginia Thompson sat in regal composure, flanked by London's most prestigious solicitors. She'd arrived in England 2 weeks earlier, purchasing a Belgravia townhouse and cultivating influential connections with practiced efficiency. Her black mourning attire now served dual purpose: widow's grief and implicit accusation that Susanna sought to profit from that grief. My client, Countess Jefferson, comes before this court to prevent a grievous fraud. Her lead solicitor, Sir Marcus Pemberton, began. His voice carried the authority of generations of legal victories. The respondents, a colonial woman of savage ancestry and an American attorney of questionable ethics, seek to extract inheritance from my client's late husband's estate based on the alleged existence of an illegitimate child. James Whitfield rose, his American accent marking him as an outsider in this British institution. Your Honor, we're not alleging anything. Count Timothee Jefferson acknowledged Daniel as his son and established legal provisions that mysteriously vanished? Pemberton interrupted. How convenient that every document supposedly proving this child's legitimacy has been destroyed or exists only in copies from foreign institutions. Your Honor, this reeks of American opportunism preying on a grief-stricken widow. The judge's expression remained unreadable. Mr. Whitfield, do you possess any original documentation from the deceased acknowledging paternity? The original will was destroyed by the Countess's family after Count Jefferson's death. However, Lloyd's of London holds a trust document established 5 years ago with no clear beneficiary named. Pemberton interjected smoothly. My client's investigators have examined it thoroughly. It references future provisions, but never specifically identifies this boy. It could refer to any number of the Count's charitable intentions. Susanna felt ice spreading through her chest. They'd anticipated challenges, but Pemberton was systematically dismantling their case with surgical precision. Furthermore, Pemberton continued, producing a leather folder, we have affidavits from Richmond Society members testifying that Miss Becker has claimed various fathers for this child over the years. She has a documented history of fabrication. We also possess medical testimony suggesting the child's features are inconsistent with Count Jefferson's lineage. That's a lie. Daniel stood suddenly, his young voice cracking through the courtroom. "My father loved me. He sent money. Daniel, sit down," Whitfield urged. But the damage was done. Pemberton smiled coldly. "The boy has been coached well. Tell me, young man, if your father loved you so deeply, why did he never acknowledge you publicly? Why did he die surrounded by legitimate family while you remained hidden with your supposed guardian?" Daniel's face crumbled. Susanna pulled him close, her own eyes burning with helpless rage. Sir Edmund Rothwell studied them over his spectacles. A native woman, a mixed-race boy, an American lawyer, and Susanna saw the verdict forming before he spoke. Prejudice didn't need voice when it lived in the architecture of power itself. "Mr. Whitfield," the judge said slowly, "I'm inclined to agree with Sir Marcus. Your evidence is circumstantial at best, fraudulent at worst. Unless you can produce concrete, original documentation proving Count Jefferson's paternity and intentions." "Your Honor, we have additional evidence arriving from Lloyd's," Whitfield said desperately. "If we could request a continuance—" "Continuances cost money, Mr. Whitfield. Money that I suspect your clients don't possess." Rothwell's tone wasn't cruel, merely factual. "The Countess, however, has the resources to keep this court occupied indefinitely. Are you prepared for a protracted legal battle?" The question hung like an executioner's blade. Whitfield's silence was answer enough. Then Pemberton produced his killing stroke, a second document, aged and official. "Your Honor, we've also located a second will, properly executed and witnessed, dated 1 week before the Count's death. In it, he explicitly states that he has no children other than those born of his marriage to the Countess, and that any claims to the contrary are fraudulent." The courtroom erupted. Whitfield lunged forward, examining the document with mounting horror. "This is a forgery. The Count never—" "It bears his signature, witnessed by his physician, Dr. Nathaniel Crawford, and his banker, Samuel Porter. Both men have provided sworn affidavits confirming its authenticity." "They're lying. Virginia paid them." "That's defamation, Mr. Whitfield," Pemberton warned. "Careful, or you'll face charges yourself." Sir Edmund Rothwell studied the second will with evident relief. Here was something concrete, properly British, appropriately documented. "This appears legitimate. I'm prepared to rule in favor of the Countess and dismiss—" "Wait!" James pulled a telegram from his coat with shaking hands. "Lloyd's of London has located additional documentation. A Parliament member, Lord Geoffrey Hartwell, witnessed the original trust. He's prepared to testify that Count Jefferson explicitly named Daniel as beneficiary and provided physical evidence of paternity. He's arriving tomorrow to present this evidence personally." Rothwell frowned, clearly displeased by the complication. "Very well. 1 day's continuance. But Mr. Whitfield, if Lord Hartwell fails to appear or his testimony proves insufficient, I'll rule immediately for the Countess." Court adjourned. Outside the courthouse, winter rain fell like tears on London's indifferent streets. Virginia Thompson emerged, surrounded by solicitors, her eyes finding Susanna's across the crowd. Her smile was a predator's promise. Then she spoke to her brothers, loudly enough to carry, "Ensure our American guests don't leave London before tomorrow's hearing, whatever means necessary." As her carriage departed, 2 hard-faced men remained behind, watching. James hurried Susanna and Daniel toward a cab. "We need to reach the American embassy. It's the only place they can't—" "Mr. Whitfield!" A boy ran up, thrusting an envelope into James's hands before disappearing into the crowd. Inside, a single line in elegant script. "Lord Hartwell died this morning. Carriage accident. Such a tragedy." VT Susanna read over James's shoulder and felt the last shred of hope die. Virginia Thompson had murdered their only witness. Tomorrow the judge would rule against them. And then, "Mother?" Daniel's voice was very small. "What happens to me if we lose?" Susanna couldn't answer, couldn't lie, couldn't bear to tell him the truth, that Virginia would see him institutionalized or dead, that 12 years of sacrifice might end with her watching them tear him from her arms. James looked at them both, these two people he'd come to love more than his own safety, and made a decision. "We run," he said quietly, "tonight. Before they can..." The two men from Virginia's retinue stepped from the shadows, blocking their path. The trap had already closed. Can three fugitives escape when the most powerful woman in 2 continents wants them destroyed? When judges are bought, witnesses are murdered, and London itself becomes a prison? When a mother's love faces a countess's infinite resources and malice, the American embassy on Portland Place became their fortress, though James knew fortresses could become tombs. Ambassador Richard Caldwell had granted them sanctuary after reviewing their case, his diplomatic immunity the only shield against Virginia's reach. "Tomorrow's hearing is our last chance," James said, pacing the small guest quarters. "Without Hartwell, without original documents, Rothwell will rule for Virginia." Susanna sat with Daniel on a narrow bed, the boy's head against her shoulder. "Then we disappear. Change our names. Go somewhere she'll never find us." "Canada," Daniel whispered, "or California. Somewhere far." James stopped pacing. Running meant abandoning everything. The inheritance, yes, but more importantly, the truth. Virginia would write history, painting Susanna as a fraud and the Count as innocent. Another generation would grow believing the lie. "No," he said quietly. "We fight." "With what?" Susanna's voice cracked. "They've destroyed everything." James pulled a leather satchel from beneath his coat, the one item he'd guarded more carefully than his own life throughout their flight from Richmond. Not everything. He unbuckled the straps with reverent care, revealing a diplomatic pouch sealed with the Count's signet ring. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, sat a Edison phonograph cylinder and a sheaf of documents bearing Parliament's seal. The Count didn't just write his confession, James said. He recorded it. His voice, his testimony, witnessed by Lord Hartwell before Virginia's people could reach him. "I've been carrying it since Richmond, too afraid to let it out of my sight." Susanna stood, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "You never mentioned..." "Because if they knew it existed, they'd have killed all of us to destroy it." He lifted the cylinder to the lamplight. The Count knew Virginia would come for Daniel. He prepared for every eventuality. This recording names Daniel as his son, details the trust at Lloyd's, condemns Virginia's cruelty, everything we need. "Will the court accept it?" Daniel asked. British law recognizes phonograph testimony in exceptional cases. Combined with Hartwell's written attestation in this pouch and the Lloyd's documentation, it creates an unbreakable chain of evidence. James met Susanna's gaze. "But there's something else, something I discovered in the Count's papers that Virginia doesn't know we have." He produced a single page, yellowed with age, a physician's report from 12 years ago. "Your sister didn't die in childbirth, Susanna. She was poisoned. Arsenic administered gradually. The attending physician suspected murder, but was paid to certify natural causes. He kept this copy as insurance, and the Count found it after your sister's death." Susanna's hand flew to her mouth. "Virginia killed her?" To prevent the scandal of the Count's infidelity from becoming public, she murdered an innocent woman to protect her reputation. James's voice hardened. Tomorrow, we don't just prove Daniel's claim. We expose Virginia Thompson as a murderer. That night, James worked by candlelight, preparing his final argument. Susanna held Daniel close, telling him stories of his mother, the beautiful native woman who'd loved a count and paid for it with her life. When dawn broke over London, they walked back to the royal courts together. Virginia's men still watched from the shadows, but Susanna no longer feared them. The dead were about to speak, and even countesses couldn't silence ghosts. Inside the Chancery Court, as Sir Edmund Rothwell took his seat with evident annoyance at the continuance, James Whitfield stood with the leather satchel in his hands. "Your Honor," he said clearly, "I'd like to present testimony from Count Timothee Jefferson himself." His voice, speaking from beyond the grave. Virginia's face went white as James lifted the phonograph cylinder. The Count was about to name his son. The phonograph's brass horn amplified the Count's voice until it filled every corner of the Chancery Court, a ghost made audible. "My name is Timothy Jefferson, Count of Henrico. I record this testimony of my own free will, witnessed by Lord Geoffrey Hartwell, Member of Parliament, on the 15th of June, 1896. I am of sound mind and body, though I know my time grows short." Virginia Thompson's composure shattered like porcelain. She lunged toward James, but her solicitors restrained her. "Stop this! It's a forgery! Silence in my court!" Sir Edmund Rothwell leaned forward, transfixed. The Count's voice continued, steady and sorrowful. "I have committed many sins, but my greatest was cowardice. 12 years ago, I fell in love with Marie Becker, a woman of the Pamunkey Nation. When she became pregnant with my child, my wife Virginia discovered the affair. Rather than face scandal, I hid Marie away. She died shortly after giving birth to my son, Daniel. I entrusted the boy to Marie's sister, Susanna Becker, who has raised him with more courage than I ever possessed." Susanna gripped Daniel's hand, tears streaming silently. "I established this recording and the accompanying trust at Lloyd's of London to ensure Daniel's future. Hair samples from both myself and the child are sealed with this testimony for scientific verification. Virginia knows of the boy's existence. She has threatened both his life and Susanna's. If you are hearing this recording, I am likely dead, and Virginia has moved to destroy them. I beg the courts, recognize my son, protect him from his stepmother's malice. He is innocent of the circumstances of his birth." The cylinder spun to silence. The courtroom remained frozen. James stepped forward. "Your Honor, Lord Hartwell witnessed this recording and provided written attestation, all contained in this sealed diplomatic pouch. Additionally, Lloyd's of London holds the trust with physical evidence for paternity verification. But there's more." He produced the physician's report. Marie Becker didn't die in childbirth. She was murdered, poisoned with arsenic over several weeks by persons acting on Virginia Thompson's orders. This report, prepared by the attending physician, Dr. Samuel Winters, documents his findings and suspicions. He was paid to falsify the death certificate. Virginia's lead solicitor, Pemberton, stood shakily. "These are monstrous accusations without proof?" A new voice rang from the gallery. A distinguished older man in American dress descended toward the bench. His resemblance to Virginia was unmistakable. The same sharp features, the same aristocratic bearing. "I am Judge Harrison Thompson of Richmond, Virginia, the Countess's brother." He approached the bench, his face carved from granite. "Your Honor, I traveled here believing my sister was the victim of a fraud. Having heard this testimony and examined evidence Mr. Whitfield shared with me last night, I must speak truth, however painful." Virginia's face drained of all color. "Harrison, you wouldn't—" "My sister consulted me about a problem in 1884, Harrison continued, each word deliberate. "A woman carrying our brother-in-law's child. I advised divorce. Virginia refused, saying she would handle it quietly. When I heard the woman died in childbirth, I thought nothing more of it. Now I understand what handle it quietly meant." He turned to face Virginia directly. "I also confirm that immediately after the Count's death, Virginia ordered his study searched and all personal papers destroyed. I witnessed her burn documents she claimed were private correspondence. I now believe those were the original will and trust documents." Sir Edmund Rothwell's expression transformed from skepticism to horror. "You're testifying against your own sister?" "I'm testifying for justice, Your Honor. My sister is a murderer and a fraud. The boy is the Count's legitimate heir." Virginia erupted from her seat. "You fool! You have destroyed us both." She spun toward her solicitors. "Do something. Seize the boy before they can—" "Countess Thompson, you will sit down," Rothwell commanded. But Virginia was beyond reason. She gestured frantically to her men in the gallery. "Take them, now!" The courtroom exploded into chaos. Virginia's hired thugs rushed the floor as court officers moved to intercept them. James grabbed Susanna and Daniel, pulling them toward a side exit. "This way!" Ambassador Caldwell appeared, flanked by embassy guards. "My carriage is outside." They burst into the grey London afternoon, running across the Strand as Virginia's men poured from the courthouse behind them. The chase careened through Cheapside's narrow streets, scattering merchants and shoppers. Daniel stumbled and James swept him up, running harder. Behind them, Virginia's voice shrieked above the crowd, "Stop them! I'll pay anything!" But Ambassador Caldwell's carriage rounded the corner ahead, American flags flying from its posts. As they tumbled inside, diplomatic immunity closed around them like armor. Through the window, Susanna watched Virginia Thompson collapse in the street, surrounded by British constables, moving to arrest her. The most powerful woman in 2 continents, brought down by the voice of a dead man and the conscience of her own brother. Justice, finally, had found its voice. 6 months later, spring sunlight painted the James River in shades of gold and amber. Daniel Jefferson stood on the portico of his Henrico County estate, land that had once belonged to Susanna's ancestors before treaties and broken promises stole it away. Now, through twists of fate and justice, it had returned. The Chancery Court's ruling had been unanimous. Daniel was recognized as Count Timothee Jefferson's legitimate heir, entitled to both Virginia properties and London holdings. Virginia Thompson herself awaited trial in Richmond for conspiracy to murder, fraud, and perjury. Her brother Harrison's testimony had demolished any remaining defense, and British authorities had extradited her to face American justice. The estate house bustled with preparation. Susanna moved through rooms hung with both Pamunkey weavings and European tapestries, 2 worlds finally coexisting in harmony. Servants from Richmond worked alongside members of Susanna's tribe, preparing for the wedding that would unite not just 2 people, but 2 communities long divided. "Mother?" Daniel appeared in the doorway, nearly unrecognizable from the frightened boy who'd fled London. At 13, he'd grown taller, his voice deeper, his bearing confident. He wore traditional Pamunkey clothing, adorned with his father's family crest. a symbol of both heritages claimed without shame. James is asking for you. He seems nervous. Susanna smiled, adjusting the beaded collar at Daniel's throat. Men always get nervous before weddings, even brave ones. He loves you. Daniel said it simply, as fact, almost as much as I do. She pulled him close, remembering the newborn thrust into her arms 12 years ago, the years of struggle, the nights she'd wondered if love would be enough. Your father would be proud of you, both your fathers, the one who gave you life and the one about to give you his name. James says I can keep Jefferson, that it's mine by right. And he's correct. You're Daniel Jefferson, son of a count, grandson of the Pamunkey, and now, if you wish, the stepson of the finest attorney in 2 continents. Outside, guests had begun arriving. Richmond society families who'd once whispered cruel rumors now came bearing gifts and apologies. Members of the Pamunkey Nation traveled from reservations across Virginia, bearing witness to one of their daughters reclaiming ancestral land. Progressive politicians from Washington mingled with British diplomats. Even Harrison Thompson attended, a broken man seeking redemption through support of his nephew. As sunset approached, Susanna walked to the river overlook where James waited. He wore formal attire, but had honored her request to remove his shoes. This ceremony would touch the earth directly, as her people's traditions required. "Ready?" he asked, offering his hand. "I've been ready since London," she replied. "Since you chose to fight when running would have been easier. Since you proved that some men value justice over comfort." The ceremony blended traditions beautifully. A Pamunkey elder spoke blessings in the old language, while a Richmond minister read from scripture. But the most powerful moment came when Daniel stepped forward, placing his hands over theirs as they exchanged vows. "3 souls," the elder said, "bound by sacrifice, courage, and love. May your union heal old wounds and build new bridges." As the sun dipped below the James River, transforming water into liquid fire, Susanna Jefferson Whitfield looked at her new husband and her son, her family, finally complete and finally safe. Behind them stood the great house that represented both her people's stolen past and Daniel's reclaimed future. Virginia Thompson's conspiracy had sought to destroy them through shame, silence, and secrets. Instead, she'd forged them into something unbreakable. A mother's love had faced a countess's infinite malice and won. Truth had survived when justice itself was on trial. And 3 fugitives had become a family that would reshape Virginia society for generations. The boy, Count Timothee Jefferson, thrust into Susanna's trembling hands on that stormy night in 1884, now stood as heir to 2 worlds, proof that courage and love could overcome even the most powerful forces of hatred. Their story had found its ending. But the legacy, that was just beginning. This story is complete. But your journey with powerful historical narratives doesn't have to end here. If this tale of justice against impossible odds moved you, if you stood with Susanna through every desperate moment, if you cheered when Virginia's conspiracy crumbled and Daniel finally claimed his birthright, then you need to subscribe now. Why subscribe? Because stories like this, of the powerless defeating the powerful, of mothers protecting children against aristocratic cruelty, of truth surviving when the entire system conspires to bury it, don't tell themselves. They need voices. They need witnesses. They need you.
If you enjoyed this story, we appreciate you a whole lot and look forward to connecting with you as we build a community on this channel.
Every day, we will put out more stories, so we need your support. Help us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. You won't miss any new exciting videos. Check out the next video. You'll love it!